then we're going to get into kind of an explanation of what wet folding and backcoating is, give you guys some information, some background on that, and then we're going to get into the hands-on portion, and I think it'll be a lot of fun. Okay.
Do I have to start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, hi. I'm Malachi Brown. I've been folding for 33 years, and that's my biggest credential, I guess. I heartily endorse all the techniques that we're talking about today because they will give you better results in many, many cases, and they're not as difficult as people think they are, and so you should try it, because I heartily believe that you should always fold with better paper than you probably already do, because life's too short to fold with crappy paper.
I'm Beth Johnson, and I learned everything I know about backcoating from John. So you were here with the master, I think. And there really isn't anything well documented on this, and we found that out again trying to. So this is how you learn from other folders, and so this is a really valuable session, I think.
My name is John Tucker. I've been folding for 19 years. I guess I'm I've done a lot of experimenting with wet folding, backcoating paper, and hopefully I can give you guys some good information today.
Jared Needle. I've been folding for like 22 years or so, and don't do too much like traditional wet folding, but you get a similar effect with complex stuff with using glue. So that's how you get curves that stay.
I'm Quentin Trollope. I've been folding for, I don't want to say 33 years, but a fairly long time, I guess. And I was always scared to do this, these type of things until I did it the first time and saw how much better the paper gets when you do it. So, just experiment. Like, use what you learn here today, but experiment a little bit at home too, and you'll find your magic potion, and then go from there.
All right, cool. Well, I think this is going to be a really good session. We have a lot of really experienced people up here, and hopefully we can learn a lot. And like Beth said, there's not really any one well-documented, good source to go to for all of this. So there's a lot of different kind of takes and different styles of backcoating and wet folding. So hopefully we'll be able to see some of those differences today. But what I want to do is tell you guys what the heck wet folding is to start off with, because I know not everybody is going to be familiar with it. So what wet folding is probably a term you've at least heard before, but wet folding is just using water or moisture on the paper while you're folding it. And this does a lot of things. It kind of softens the paper, allows you to fold it without getting really harsh, sharp lines in it. You can get some really organic, nice curved shapes, and it gives the paper staying power in its final form. The paper wants to spring back when you fold it, but if you wet fold it, it'll want to stay in its final shape and stay there. Paper doesn't want to, stay in place when you fold it, and origamists have been fighting this for years and years in many different ways. And one of the ways to do that is using foil paper. You guys probably have some foil paper in your convention bags, and metal, you can bend it and it'll deform and stay pretty much where it is. So put some foil on the back of paper, then you can get it to stay where you want it to. But foil is kind of ugly, and the paper generally wrinkles up a lot when you're using foil, and it isn't ideal for a lot of things. You can put wires and things inside your bottle, or tape it or glue it, but wet folding can be as valuable a tool as all of those things, and has some advantages that using foil or wires or other things doesn't quite get you.
One thing to note about using tissue foil or foil is that even if you do it perfectly and you didn't wrinkle anything, a year later it's probably going to be wrinkled because something's going to ding it just a little bit, and it doesn't hold up up over time as well as wet folding something and using that technique. So
Yeah, I know Lang talked about during the 90s, during the bug wars, everyone was starting to fold these complex insects, and I guess that's about when tissue foil started to become really popular. But there was kind of this ritual for people who were displaying all these bugs and conventions where when they were setting up their displays, they'd take everything out and straighten out all the legs and smooth out wrinkles and everything, just to fiddle with it until, they ironed out all those dings and all that I was talking about. So wet folding, gives you all these advantages, but I want to give you a background on why wet folding works as well. So what happens when you're wet folding? The water doesn't just magically give paper all these properties. There's some interesting science going on. So all paper, or almost all paper, has something called sizing in it, and all sizing is a fancy word for glue, pretty much. So if you think about printer paper or copy paper, it's really springy and really smooth and really crisp feeling. That's because it has a really high amount of sizing in it. So when paper is made, they'll put what's called internal sizing into the paper. They'll disperse glue in among all the fibers, and that'll help hold things together. It gives it kind of this crispness and this staying power, so when you fold it, it wants to kind of spring back a little bit, or when you bend it, it wants to spring back. It allows you to get nice sharp creases, and it can help ink from bleeding the paper as well. Some paper that doesn't have a lot of sizing is like newspaper, is really floppy feeling. This paper doesn't have sizing in it, so if you mess with this, it feels really floppy and mushy and not crisp at all. And that's a lot of the time not what we want for origami. But when you wet fold a paper with sizing in it, the sizing, the glue dissolves in the water. It softens up. So that's why the paper starts feeling softer, or one of the reasons paper starts feeling softer when you get it wet is that glue dissolves. It kind of releases the paper to kind of move where it wants. And when you fold it, you can move the paper to whatever shape you want it to be, and then when it dries, the sizing dries as well. So that glue re-hardens, and that's what kind of allows wet folded models to stay in their final position, what gives them longevity and prevents them from getting dinged up like foil paper. So another thing, so a lot of paper doesn't have sizing, so sometimes you might want to add sizing to paper. Now you can't put it inside the paper, but you can paint it on the surface, and it'll soak into the fibers, it'll dry, and then you have paper that has essentially this sizing to it. It'll be nice and crisp and foldable. So that's one of the things we're going to be doing today, is adding sizing to our paper. So, okay, that brings us to backcoating. So what backcoating is essentially adding sizing to paper. And I think more specifically, backcoating is joining two pieces of paper together, gluing them together. But you could do that at the same time as you add sizing to a piece of paper. So when you add sizing, you give the paper a lot better properties for folding, but you can also do some other fun things like gluing two pieces of paper together. There's a lot of issues that can come along when you're doing this, because when paper gets wet, it doesn't just dissolve any sizing it has, but the fibers soak up water and expand, and paper gets a lot weaker when it's wet. So wet newspaper tears really easily. So does wet origami paper. So whenever you're preparing paper and adding sizing to it, you want to have good control over it. So we're going to be using these folding boards, but everyone always uses a flat surface when they're preparing paper. Because if you get a piece of paper wet and let it dry, it'll get all wavy, distorted, and warped, and we don't want that. So what people generally do is use a nice hard flat surface to lay your paper on to kind of ease it into shape while it's drying. Another thing that happens when paper gets wet, when the fibers of the paper soak up all that moisture, they expand. So when paper gets wet, it actually gets bigger. And if the fibers are all going in different directions and everything is perfectly uniform, it'll get bigger in both directions. But a lot of paper has a direction to the fibers. It's called a grain of the paper. And that can happen if it's machine made, if it's going, on this roll, and then that gives it a direction to it. Or even handmade paper, when you pull it out, you pull it in one direction, and that can give it a little bit of a grain to it. Some other handmade papers are made by just pouring the fibers down on a mesh, and the fibers can go wherever. So that'll expand relatively uniformly. But a lot of the times your paper will expand more in one direction than the other, and that can also cause some issues. So that's another reason for using a nice hard backing is controlling it with all that expanding and contracting when it's drying, and just trying to get it to hold shape. So I think it's probably a good time to get into the actual specific method of backcoating and get you guys doing some hands-on paper preparation. What I wanted to do this early so we can do the rest of this panel and you guys can ask questions, and so hopefully by the end your paper will have dried and you'll be able to peel it off and have some nice new paper to hold with. Okay, I'm going to grab a couple of sheets myself and give you a demonstration of what we're going to do here. And let's see, I'll grab two very different colors here. You can hopefully see. So the things you have in front of you, you have a little bottle of methyl cellulose, you have a spray bottle, and a brush. So I'm going to...
when you say little bottle, this is like a huge amount of methyl cellulose. Like, you're not going to use this whole bottle on this one.
Yeah, that's true. Yes?
Is it better to have like an eyedropper or something?
For the water?
No.
For the methyl cellulose? What I do for methyl cellulose, let me show you what I have. This is what I have. I'm running a little bit low because I filled up all these bottles. But this is just some, I think it's like a trail mix or something. Just a plastic bottle that I mix my methyl cellulose in. And then I have a big soft brush that I use.
A very precise instrument.
Yeah.
Because what happens if, so methyl cellulose is kind of like water? Will it like
So
soak
it's
up?
a powder that you, just really quickly,
This is
it
methyl
looks like this.
cellulose.
You can buy it a lot of places.
Don't fly with
Actually,
it.
it's pretty easy to find.
Too late.
And you mix it with the water, and there's recommended proportions, but it's kind of also something to experiment with taste. You can make it a little goofier or a little thinner. And that's, I think, a little bit of a personal preference.
Yeah.
I like it goofier, and it stores forever. Like, you just leave it in the bucket and it doesn't spoil. So you mix up a big batch and then you really have fun.
But make sure it's closed because
Yeah.
the water does
It will
evaporate.
evaporate, right?
And it gets thicker over time.
Is it sort of like paper mache based or wallpaper based?
Yeah.
Wallpaper paste.
Yeah, wallpaper paste I think typically uses CMC, which is very close to the same thing as MC. It's another natural glue, essentially, that's water soluble.